report, and I'm the communications chair, which is why I'm talking to you tonight. Our communications and events committee. Tonight we're going to be, the city is going to present to us information on the upcoming bond referendum. It's going to be on the November ballot. You probably already know that. And I think that I will appreciate the fact that we have one more board member here, Dick Farmer, and Lee Fleck, two more. Thank you. With that, I will turn it over to Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
I love having a microphone and talking to 12 people in a short time. Makes me feel much more important than I am. I got to tell you a little story. It's really quick. So I run out here, well, up until 2022. I run on this river up here, up the hill from the park from Don White. And I've always wondered what was down this road. So this is my first time ever to come into your very, very cool clubhouse. I feel like I'm now a member of the Martin's Landing Club, and I accept entry into your club whether you want me or not.
Show us the quality.
Yes. So let me introduce my colleagues and friends, and we're really excited to have everybody here. So we have all of the council and myself. To my left, Councilmember Lee Hills, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Dr. Peter Vanstrom, Councilmember Will Mortland, and we've got a new guy, I don't know, Councilmember Mike Palermo. Also from our staff, we have a fantastic staff in the city of Roswell. Our new Economic Development Director, Daryl Connolly, our Community Relations Director, Julie Breckville, our City Attorney, Michael Petty in the back, our Fire Chief, Joe Panino, in the white shirt. Joe, where's the fancy black jacket you were wearing earlier?
Dress down.
Dress down. Our Police Chief, Jim Conroy, our Finance Director, Ryan Luckett, and of course the guy who will take the big cozy chair, our Transportation Director, Dave Cox. So we're here, this is an informational session. Did I leave anybody out? Take it away. So, oh, thank you. He's sitting down. So we're very fortunate tonight, filling in for Jeff Weatherman. We've got an upgrade, our Deputy Director for Parks and Rec, Stephen Malone. So tonight, I just want to talk to you about three questions. There are three ballot questions. Voting starts next Monday on November the 8th. There'll be ballot question 1, ballot question 2, and ballot question 3. Ballot question 1 is a general obligation bond for $107.2 million for Parks and Recreation. Ballot question 2 is a general obligation bond question for $52 million for police and fire. Ballot question 3 is a $20 million obligation bond for a parking garage in downtown Roswell. So that being said, I'd like to introduce first Councilmember Will Mortland, who's the liaison for Parks and Rec, and Deputy Director Steve Malone.
Hello everybody. Does everybody need the mic, or do we not need the mic? Need the mic?
Mike.
Okay.
Speak good.
All right. So, Will Mortland, the liaison to the Roswell Recreation, Parks, Historical Assets, and Cultural Affairs Division. Gotten to know the guys over the past 10 months now, and never could I have imagined what goes into the Recreation and Parks Division. It is a monster. But that being said, lots of credit goes to the staff here and Jeff's team, Steve. But I wanted to start tonight in sharing a personal story. And I apologize to those of you that have heard this already several times, at least twice today. But just to kind of break the ice, I want to give you a little feedback and perspective on how we got here. And when I say we, I mean my family. In 2016, my wife Jen and I were well on life's way. We had a house in Birmingham subdivision of Homewood, 2 good jobs, 2 kids, 2 dogs. You know, we're well on the way. Everything's going well. She comes to me one day and says, "Hey, guess what? I have a job opportunity." I said, "All right, well, that's great. What are we doing?" said, well, I've got this job opportunity with Emory, and the only catch is we may be having to relocate. For whatever reason, I was thinking that she was going to be able to relocate office space and we would remain in Birmingham. Never did I imagine that we would be relocating to the Atlanta area. So once we got through the negotiation process there between the two of us, I said, all right, went to my office, got permission from my guys to continue employment with them in a remote status. We got that handled. So now we're off to Atlanta. We don't know where we're going to Atlanta, but we're just going to Atlanta. And this is kind of where Roswell becomes important. Because at that point we started doing what's called city shopping. We weren't house shopping, we were city shopping. We spread a wide net. We started in Decatur, went to Atlanta, went to Smyrna, Vinings, Alpharetta, all over. And then we stumbled across Roswell. There's something special about Roswell. Roswell reminds me of my hometown. There's so much that Roswell offers that you have to be here to know. From the city services to the quality of life to the educational opportunities for the children to raise a productive family. These are all things that are just standard check the box type things. Then we really got into Roswell when we started looking around. The thing that stood out the most, the parks, the natural assets, the history. These are things that can't be replicated anywhere else in the North Fulton area. I said, okay, Roswell it is. So we start coming this way, set up shop, and start feeling around. And that's where we got a good feel for Roswell itself as we involved our children in the recreation and parks programs. We started joining Cub Scouts, we started joining soccer teams, did the whole thing. And that's where I got a fine appreciation for what Roswell really offers through the Recreation and Parks Department. That's why I'm honored to be part of this informational session for the Recreation and Parks Division. You can't find this anywhere. So what we're putting in front of the public, the voting public tonight, is an opportunity to bring the Recreation and Parks Department forward. We are polishing off the gem. This is what really makes Roswell stand out. As we polish this is where we're going to show you, and this is where Steven's going to come in and kind of break this down and go step by step, where we're breaking down certain projects, building back up from the ground up, finding the foundation, finding any kind of problems, fixing those problems. We've got a system that's 40 years old. It needs some love. So that's what we're here to do tonight. I appreciate the time. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to walk us through the projects. And we are doing questions at the end, correct? There we go. Doing questions at the end. Thanks for having us. Look forward to having a great conversation.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And I'm Stephen Malone. I'm the Deputy Director for the Recreation, Parks, Historic, and Cultural Affairs Department. I've been with the city now 22 years. I started here in 1999 as a part-timer, so I feel like I've been a part of this city and watched it grow. As that 22-year career, you will notice a lot of our parks when you go in them have been, were built 10, 20, 30, 40, and in some cases of certain buildings along the river, even longer. So a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is going to be what you would consider how you're going to address that ongoing maintenance, that deferred maintenance that we had, similar to what you would think of your own home. You know, if you were to buy a house 30 years ago, what would you need to do to keep that up so that the price value of that home and the sustainability and the safety of that home maintains itself over that 30, 40 years? So real quick, I want to go back because about 2016, the city, mayor, and council adopted the River Park Master Plan. In 2018, we did an impact study to determine what the cost of implementing that River Park Master Plan. That was $35 million. As we go through some of this information, that's going to be the first segment that we touch on, is the River Park investment. That details specifically Riverside Park, Roswell River Landing, Azalea Park, and Dom White Memorial Park. What you won't see in this bond that was part of the initial River Park master plan was a building at the Ace Sand location. That accounted for a large portion of that $35 million that went into that economic impact study. But as we've all noticed over the years, is anytime we get a significant amount of rain, we have to be very cautious about the flooding that happens along Riverside Road. So what we've elected to do in the direction of Mayor and Council is look at the opportunity for dredging operations there at Ace Sand, and the Mayor will be able to get into more details, but we are right now in the procurement process to bring on a contractor that will do dredging services right there at the Ace Sand location. So overall, I think we can all admit that that has a significant impact along the river corridor, and it's probably the first key step that goes into the development of the River Park Master Plan. Without that, there's a lot of challenges that creates along Riverside Road. So again, that's the first segment. That's the River Park investment. Again, the impact study that we did in 2018 was $35 million. In absence of that building as part of that plan, this bond would include a $25 million would be what would be going into the implementation of the River Park Master Plan. The next segment we have there, and I'll backtrack a little bit, as soon as this mayor and council took office in January of this year, there was a consistent underlying question that was being asked. What does it take to get our parks and facilities up to the standard in which the expectation is for our citizens? What does it take? That kept being the question that we were tasked with, the one that we were challenged to try to find the answer to. And part of that process started last year when we were going through the updating of our 5-year park master plan. So as we went through that park master plan process with the mayor and council just approved 3 weeks ago, I believe now, we were able to determine that there was roughly $75 million in deferred maintenance that was out there within our parks and infrastructure. So as you see the park improvement section here, you're going to see 11 parks. The majority of those are going to be at the top end, and I'll break those down for you. Again, here they are. East Roswell Park, this gives you a significant outlook at what that $62.9 million encompasses. And that breaks it down by those 11 parks that were mentioned before. You'll notice East Roswell Park on there, that's at 8.6. Mayor and council in this fiscal cycle has already approved $3 million for park improvements at East Roswell. That will happen no matter what happens with the bond in November. So those steps and those improvements are already taking place now. As we kind of go down that list, you'll see Roswell Area Park at $20 million. That includes $5 million for a complete pool renovation. And then you'll see the 4 parks out to the right, which are our trail connectivities that break down the 7 branches, Big Creek Park, Oxbow Trail connectivity, and the Smith Plantation trails. The other thing that I want to mention as we go through this is the connectivity between bicycle and pedestrian improvements as well as sidewalks. There's been a sidewalk gap analysis that is taking place. This involves $20 million. I think if you were to speak with any of the members of the council, that they would probably tell you that's a good chunk of about $180 million that's out there that could go into that sidewalk gap analysis. But this $20 million starts to address a lot of those critical needs that are there to start that process. I think that's it.
So before we move on, something I thought, so Councilman Worthing, I think you've done a good job of doing it. Steve and Ryan jump in. Can you, again, going back to the deferred maintenance, because I want to bring the connection to East Roswell Park, can you mention the three years of funding, and then so that hopefully you all realize what a big deal it is that this mayor and council in this current annual budget has really allocated towards East Roswell Park?
So in budget cycle 2020, we had deferred maintenance approved of $900,000. In budget year 2021, that number fell to $100,000. In year 2022, that number further eroded to $75,000. $55,000. That's the deferred maintenance piece that we're talking about. That is the runaway train that we're trying to get a hold of right here. As what Stephen was saying, if you have a house, 30-year-old house, you can't just let it sit there in elements and pretend like nothing's going to happen to it outside of regular depreciation. That's what we're trying to do.
Appreciate that, thank you. So $900,000, which wasn't even covering everything that was necessary, dropping down to those extremely low numbers the last 2 years. But we've all seen that the deteriorations that are occurring. Probably some of you have probably been in some of the complaints around East Roswell Park, and that's where it was a priority for this mayor and council. That $3 million is currently allocated. There's no change in that. So irrelevant of the bond, irrelevant of anything else that goes on, $3 million to really make sure that we are reinvesting in our parks, and especially reinvesting on the east side of Roswell to make sure that, you know, we have so many residents that have moved here for the green space, for the parks, and really just this mayor and council prioritizing, which I appreciate.
They have 1.3 million in operational maintenance and then 1.3 budget compared to 900.
That's a great point. So that 3 million is not even included in the 1.3. So $1.3 million this year annual budget, plus $3 million specifically to East Roswell Park. And in a year where it's the first year in a long time in the city of Roswell, there's not a tax increase. So none of you got an advertisement in the paper, which is required by law when there's a tax increase, because we actually went back to a rollback rate, which has not happened in a long time. And I learned from the mayor that we're actually is it the only city in North Fulton or all of Fulton?
I believe it's the only city in Fulton. I know it's the only city in North Fulton, but I think Fulton as well.
So-
a full rollback.
So the only city in probably North Fulton, probably all, definitely in North Fulton, all of Fulton, actually went back to the rollback rate. So we're not raising taxes, we're spending more investment, but that's really just trying to maintain things. This is the opportunity to really get us where certainly we've heard from some residents where they want to go.
Is it okay if we hold questions and do question 2 and then question 3? We have found, this is our third one today, we have found they go quicker when we do the presentations and then do the questions and with y'all's permission. So, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Stephen. And there's more we'll add on to that, I'm sure, with questions earlier. So, question 2 is police and fire. I'd like to introduce Councilmember Lee Hills and Police Chief Jim Conroy and Fire Chief Joe Panino.
I am the lucky one who is the council member liaison to fire and police for our public safety. And it's been an eye-opener and a joy to get to know these guys, not to mention the departments, really well, and I still have a lot to learn. Something that I would like to point out, if you aren't aware, we have been, starting right out of the gate in January, huge advocates for our public safety in the city of Roswell. Of course, you've heard we've just instilled this year, this budget cycle, best-in-class pay for our police department, and we're transitioning to a full-time, historic move, a full-time fire department, which I'm tickled to death about, and I know our residents are too. Something that I'll point out, as Councilmember Northland just mentioned, and so did Mr. Malone, where everyone just drifted off to, the deferred maintenance in our rec and parks area is serious. It's a big deal, and I believe that with our public safety, we've had an ignored maintenance issue for decades. We've got substandard. I'm going to start with fire, and then I'm going to move to police and public safety headquarters quickly, and then I'll introduce the professionals here. But we've allowed our fire department, our fire stations to really fall apart. They're substandard. We've got safety issues on how vehicles enter and exit the bays. You'll see pictures, but the living quarters, since our men and women stay there 24 to 48 hours at a crack, are really unacceptable. I wouldn't put my worst enemy in there, no offense, Chief, but to go to work with a professional crew and have those kind of circumstances, you'll see. And the same with our public safety, we have a responsibility to you and to ourselves to take care of what we have to take care of us in our police department and pulling together a police headquarters if you so choose to vote that way. So with that, I'm going to have Fire Chief Panino take over and talk about fire, and then he will relinquish the mic to Chief Conroy and go with public safety headquarters.
We hope that he will
Yeah, I might.
Oh, yeah, while you're, I have also a key, sorry about that, Chief. This is a commemorative key for the opening of the police station in 1992. And this is significant because in 1990, we had 48,000 people living here in Roswell, and now we have 96,000. So you'll hear more about outgrowing our spaces and the life expectancy of some of our facilities. But happy to pass this around so you can check it out. I do want it back. Conroy, you can't have it. So I'm going to pass that around, and thank you.
As Councilmember Hill said, Joe Canino, and I've had the pleasure of serving as your fire chief for the last almost a year and a half now. And one of the things that we were able to accomplish right when we got in is start to work with a consultant to do a gap analysis of the fire department. So everything from how we operate to our staffing model to our policies and our deployment and of course our fire stations where they're located and the age of them. We brought back that gap analysis to Mayor and Council, and we are now getting ready to bring a strategic planning council on the 24th that will really map out where the fire department is going to be going in the next 5 years based on that gap analysis and what was found. It's the first gap analysis, first strategic plan that's ever been done for the Roswell Fire Department. So one of the things that it identifies our staffing model is not adequate. So we have a part-time staffing model. Our firefighters come from 21 different departments where they work full-time and they work with us part-time, so they pick up shifts. But that leaves some vacancies on holidays, weekends, and times where it's not popular to be at work. So, this Mayor and Council approved 21 full-time station captains in this year's budget, and we are onboarding them at the end of this month. So we have 21 full-time captains, and that helps me rest easier at night as the fire chief, because I know that at every fire station, all 7 in the city, there is a full-time supervisor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to ensure that we are better serving the citizens of Roswell. But the gap analysis also found some issues with our capital and fire stations. On the left, in red, what you see is our 7 existing fire stations, our current fire stations, and 1.5 mile drive times. That drive distances from those stations, and that's measured by ISO. That's what the Insurance Services Office uses to figure out coverage of where the fire station should be located. And they, of course, provide a rating to your community on fire suppression, how well that you deal with structure fires. On the right is what they proposed. So they have Fire Station 21 moving south, 22 moving north, an additional fire station on the west end, and of course the big one, which is Fire Station 27. You see it in the red there at the bottom right, is way out at the border and leaves a big gap on the east side of Roswell where our citizens are not being served as quickly as they should. And it's worth mentioning here that Fire Stations 22, 23, and 28, they're not new bond projects. Those have been proposed as far back as 2015 at different city work sessions and meetings. Those just kind of have been kicked along and not funded. We had the consultant come, and of course they said, yeah, those are valid, those are needed projects, so they stay on here as well. Fire Station 21 on Alpharetta, built as a car dealership in 1948. The city took ownership in the 1980s of it and has done some remodeling, but the bones are not there. So it's a back-end station, not a pull-through station, and it needs upgrades. Our encoding system, our radio systems, the living quarters, all that stuff needs to be upgraded. It wasn't purpose-built as a fire station, nor is it in a correct location, ideally. Fire Station 22 on Howes and Crabapple was built in 1975 when the fire department was an all-volunteer fire department. So this station was not built to be staffed 24 hours a day. Now, your Roswell Fire Department responds to 10,000 emergencies a year. It's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this station, along with Station 23, has less than 1,500 square feet of living quarters, has 1 bathroom for everyone that works there, and doesn't have separate sleeping quarters, no storage. Fire Station 22 and 23 don't have room in the apparatus tanks. It barely fits the fire engines that we have. I cannot put a ladder truck, which I would like to do at one of these stations, because it just won't accommodate the size of the truck, and I won't park the ladder truck outside, even though Roswell is safe. I don't feel comfortable keeping the ladder truck outside. Fire Station 23 has land where we can build on site. It's about 3 acres. So we have room to actually put temporary housing, move the firefighters, rebuild on site, and move them back in. Just an example of the maintenance that everyone's been talking about. 2 weekends ago, we had an issue with the sewer here. It backed up, the toilets wouldn't work. We had to send a after-hours plumbing crew out there. They snaked the drain. We just spent $4,000 repairing part of the sewer line, and they're saying, oh yeah, the rest of it needs to be replaced now, but it's under the foundation. So we're struggling with, are we gonna spend the money to dig up the foundation on the station that's already 40-something years old, it's 50 years old, and it doesn't meet our requirements as far as size. And this is the inside of the fire station 22 and 23. You can see on the top left, the kitchen areas are very small. There's just really not a lot of room to do anything with. Like I said, less than 1,500 square feet. You can see on the bottom left and the top right, that's our current fire engine squeezed into the apparatus bay. There's really not room to fit anything else in there. And then at the bottom right, you see, in the middle, you see our living, the bunk room where our firefighters sleep. It was a big open area, and we put up some makeshift walls, wooden walls to try to separate it, but it's not what we would consider modern, current day standards, which is individual bunk rooms for everybody. Because if you're working in the fire department a third of your life, every third day, over 30 years, we need to try to get you some sleep when you can. And that means not being in one room together with everybody snoring and making noise and not being able to sleep, because it has an impact on their long-term health, especially their cardiac health. Some studies have proven that. And also, we don't have gender separation. We have a diverse group of people working at Roswell Fire Department, but they need to have some fire safety. Station 27 is the big one. So you can see by the driving range here, this is about a quarter mile from the Gwinnett County line and a quarter mile from Sandy Springs city limit. So if you look at it here in the red on the bottom right, it can really only respond out of the station in one direction. It's not really responding 365 degrees around the station because it's kind of pinned in the corner of the city down there, an enclave. And what CPSM says, and my professional opinion obviously agreed, that it should be moved further into the city to serve more Roswell citizens. And then this is our Emergency Operations Center, our EOC. This is actually a room in City Hall, a meeting room that's been converted to a makeshift emergency operations center. We have some TVs in there and some tables. We have a lot of issues because when there's a nuclear disaster, or we have to recall the people in this room, the department directors, to serve the city for days on end in a regional disaster, we need a place that has showers, places you can cook, places where you can sleep if you're not on duty, and we need communications infrastructure. So this building here, this room here specifically, we can't transmit out of with our radios. We cannot reach our firefighters and our police officers in their vehicles from inside because we just don't have the communication. So we need, a city this size needs a purpose-built emergency operations center. And then the last picture here is of our current fire department headquarters. So this is off Henry Road in Alpharetta. It's in the first floor of the transportation building. And we moved in there, I think, somewhere around 15 years ago out of City Hall because City Hall was filling up and the space was available, so we moved out there. When I got to Roswell, we had headquarters staff kind of spread out to the different fire stations, an office here, an office there, and that's very inefficient when you're trying to have meetings and talk about what we want to do with the fire department. So I recalled them all back to headquarters, and we made room for them. And how we made room, at the top right, you can see that's a cubicle in our lobby. We put cubicles in our lobby to try to add more workspaces. On the top left, you can see in some situations, we've taken offices and put 2 people in the office, 2 workstations in one office. The bottom left and the bottom right, when I arrived here, those were closets for storage and plans. So we moved the storage out and we moved people into those offices. And the center there on the bottom, that's our fire marshal's office. Those are 5 workstations where our assistant fire marshals work. So we're just essentially out of room. And moving to a public safety headquarters checks a lot of boxes for us. One, it gets us closer to the 911 center that serves police and fire. Chief Conner was very lucky. He walks out of his office, down the hall, and talks talks to the 911 director. I have to drive 5+ miles across town or have a schedule a meeting or do a Zoom call. And also for our collaboration, it works better if we're in the same building. So to have something where we have that DOC, the 911 center, and a fire and police headquarters really does a lot for our collaboration and be able to serve the citizens. Now I'll turn it over to Chief Conroy for the next piece.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, thanks for inviting us here tonight. I'm Jim Conroy, the Chief of Police for the City of Roswell. I'm honored to say that I'm now in my 4th year serving as your Chief of Police. Prior to my starting here, the prior police chief, the prior 911 director, mayor, and city council recognized the need for a new 911 emergency communication center. They started the planning and design phase prior to my starting here at the department. 4 years later, we're no closer to that goal. Funding has been elusive. We did receive $1 million in federal funding that will go towards that project. Except for those funds, we've not made any progress in the new 911 center. This is the lifeline between the community and your public safety responders, so it's critical that that be a very strong facility. As Joe mentioned, the efficiencies for having a combined public safety center, whether we're in the same building, same complex, same campus, there's many efficiencies. There's efficiencies for security, there's efficiencies for technology, there's efficiencies for our emergency needs, such as battery backup, generator backup, and cameras to monitor the campus. And Lee mentioned, we moved into our facility in 1992. That was 30 years ago. Roswell was a very different city 30 years ago. Much smaller geographically, much smaller population-wise. We had 88 police officers, and today we have 160 police officers plus 50 civilians. Most of the civilians work in the 911 center. We are too bursting at the seams. We've repurposed as much space as we can into office space from the jail, but the office space and parking is severely inadequate. I think these demonstrated needs explain the benefits and the needs that we have for a new public safety facility. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. How cool is it that the entire city council and staff is here to come see us at Mark's Landing? It's kind of cool, isn't it? Really, when you think about it. Think about that through the history of the city. Isn't it kind of cool to have the entire council here in front of you, like, accountable? I think it's cool. So the third question, ballot question 3, is $20 million for a parking deck in downtown Canton. And this time I'd like to introduce the Economic Liaison for the City Council, Dr. Peter Vanstrom, and the Economic Development Director, Darrell Conley.
Hello guys, how are you all doing? This is an opportunity, and Darrell's going to take over in just a second. It's an opportunity for me to remind those of you who are here for the first time that these are 3 different bond issues, 3 different bond questions. You can vote yes, all 3. You can vote yes for your favorite, and no for the others. I just want to clarify that we've had them divided out into 3 different bond questions. Secondly, I just want to reiterate that this is your decision. I think what Councilman Palermo stopped just short of saying was we did not increase your taxes, and one of the big reasons was because we want you to make the decision of where your tax dollar is spent. You've heard a lot so far about what we're trying to bring forward for the city, and I know you're going to make the decision that's right for you. I do want to say that this council is amazing. I was not at 2 of the meetings today, and the staff is incredible. They have had 3 of these in one day. I was at work in the morning. Darrell and I did represent a couple different luncheons today, and then we're here for the evening. But these guys have been working so hard. I'm humbled by the energy that they have. So, talking about the parking deck, I'm gonna basically hand over to Darrell to go through some initial numbers and slides and things like that, and then just kind of wrap up at the end, and then we'll go to questions, correct?
Thank you, Councilmember Vanstrom. I'm Darrell Conley. I'm the new Economic Development Director, and with the city for only about 4 months now. Before that, I was with the City of New York as economic development up there for about 11 years. And then before that, I actually was an East Sider like you all here. I lived here on Centennial Overlook by the high school for about 8 years. So I understand the East Side and some of the issues that you have here. Since I've joined, I've been working with the mayor and council on economic development strategy. That's something that the city of Roswell has not had, ever. And so when you look at Alpharetta, look at some of the other cities around, they've had economic development plans. They've been executing them. And so Roswell has been left behind over many, many years. Alpharetta has been getting all the large businesses and for at least 12 years or so. So we're looking to do something differently today. And part of the economic development plan is doing some master planning around the city. One of the master plans we're working on is here on the east side. It's at Georgia 400 and Holcomb Bridge Road. And so we've hired the Sizemore group to work with us and the stakeholders and try to figure out what could be there and try to bring you some more commercial development. Something you guys will all enjoy. There's also some other planning studies that we're looking at throughout the city. The parking deck is not in your area. It is in downtown, in the historic district. It's a $20 million bond. And we are looking at potentially doing a public-private partnership. We don't know exactly where it's going to be yet. We don't want to disclose that because somebody may come along and try to buy that property or the property next door. So we have a couple ideas, but there's nothing that we can disclose to you. The parking structure would be go through the Historic Preservation Commission and make sure that it is in line with what the neighborhood would like. And so there is going to be a public process. So you will have more input after this bond referendum. So we're estimating that cost of space will be probably $25,000, maybe a little bit more, depending on the type of deck. There's also the acquisition of land, so we don't know exactly how many spaces we're going to do in the deck just yet, but we'll go through a process and figure that out. And this is really an economic development project. It's going to help the businesses in downtown along Canton Street. There have been 2.62 million visits, individual visits, in the last year. And that's increasing year over year by 10%. The length of stay, 113 minutes, 145 businesses and 1,400 employees. So, there is a parking issue down there. You can drive over there and, try to find a parking space. Do you think it's a problem now? Think about when population starts increasing in surrounding communities and, think about 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so this is going to help solve some of those problems going in the future. I'm going to answer. I'm going to turn this back to you.
Well, just wonderful. Thank you, by the way. That was great. Just some ideas of parking decks. What you have to realize is that you can do a mixed use around the parking deck and hide the deck completely. That's that private partnership, public partnership we may be looking for. You can utilize the top of that deck and want a lot of public input as to what we want on with this parking. Maybe there's a park that goes on the top. Maybe there's solar power. So there's a lot of different options with the parking deck. I just want to be really clear and follow up with what Daryl said. There will be a lot of public input based on if this bond referendum passes or not. Let's go ahead and give the mayor the microphone back and we'll handle some questions.
Thanks, Dr. Van Strom. Thank you, Daryl. So we have two wallflowers that don't get a chance to say much, Christine Hall and Mike Palermo. So I thought tonight we might mix it up a little bit and let you two kind of handle the Q&A a little bit if you'd like to take that on. You guys up for this? Let's see, we got two microphones working. Hello.
You know what, my Councilmember Palermo can do the Q&A. I just want to add one thing on the economic driver for the parking deck that wasn't mentioned. So out of those million, or how many visits?
So 2.6
million. 85% of those are outside of 30075 and 30076 zip codes. So those are folks coming into our area, spending dollars, supporting our businesses, helping the sales tax revenue. And with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent, thank you. So we're pretty quick to, I see a first hand. But I just want to say great job to everybody presenting, really appreciate that. And Daryl, just the fact that as he brought up, other cities had economic development plans, Roswell did not. That's going to change. Just as other cities, like if you look at Alpharetta, Milton, et cetera, they all had economic development directors in City Hall. Roswell did not, so this mayor and council hired an economic development director to make sure that we're focused on being proactive for the people of Roswell instead of just reactive, as we've seen so much with some of these developments that have not helped the city of Roswell. So hopefully a lot of good things in the future. But here's the first question, Mr. Lennon.
Thank you, my name is Michael Litton, and I stand before you as a tribal wise one. And of the 38 years I've lived here in Roswell, 27 have been spent in beautiful Martin's Landing. And of those 20, I have, weather permitting, have biked along Riverside Road at least twice a week. And of those 7, I've biked along the multi-use path 3 times a week. So at the risk of being perceived as a bit braggadocious, I would suggest, even Scott Long, I don't believe there's anyone that has traversed that sacred section of river more than I have for as many years. So I have a couple suggestions as it relates to that experience base. And a shout out to the council and specifically Kurt, because he joined me on one of those rides early in his tenure as mayor. And we had a great time and was able to share some of the vision that I'm going to share with you all tonight. So, number one, I have to applaud you all, just from the bottom of my heart, for abandoning this spaceship idea, which is what we pay these consultants a tremendous amount of our money to come up with in this river plan. And that would have been an insane idea, as you guys have identified, because it would have taken off the option of dredging and using sand and gravel as that location, which is the only place to do dredging along the 7-mile stretch of river. So brilliant. And it would have been insane from the standpoint that you all are coming to us asking for $200 in money just for Parks and Rec and having another building to maintain. We need another building in Roswell like we need a hole in our pocketbook, right? And for those of us that live in Martin's Landing, Steve's analogy was accurate. We have old homes, some of them 50 years old, because that's how old Martin's Landing is. So if I had one of those homes and it was in disrepair and said to you all, I'm going to put an addition on it, you'd go, Michael, I think that's kind of nuts. So what is the answer? In my observation, the residents have spoken loud and clear as to what they want. And they've spoken not by a survey, but by their actions. If you go down to these beach volleyball courts and that river put-in on a weekend in the summer, it's packed. In fact, it's so packed that people will park along Riverside Road and risk getting a ticket. And you might ask, why don't they park at the sand and gravel? And I'll tell you the answer. It's too far. And how do I know it's too far? Because I bike it routinely, but I also timed it so I could speak accurately. I got off my bike and I parked the closest you can get to the beach volleyball, and I walked my bike along what I think is the prettiest stretch right here that Kurt and I traversed. And it took me 5.5 minutes. No one with a family is going to schlep a raft and their cooler and their kids 5.5 plus minutes to get to these beach volleyball courts and the put-in. So I believe the simplest, most cost-effective solution, and a solution that gives us the opportunity to dredge when we get that chance, put in more beach volleyball courts at that location and another river put-in. Take pressure off the existing space, right? And we can do that whether we get a bond approved or not. It's simple, cost-effective, and it maximizes our options. And to put the beach volleyball courts in perspective, Cartersville has 12. Canton have 5. this complex would go a long ways to accomplishing our collective vision of making Roswell the most family-friendly city in the United States. And we could name it the ACE Beach Volleyball Complex. ACE as in serving ace. That's thanks to Andrew Leonardi for that, whose daughter is an active volleyball player. I got some background information from Andrew. And I'll close with this. These same geniuses, and I use that, I'm dripping with sarcasm, right? Suggested that we take these 2 beach volleyball courts and relocate them out to Girard Landing, close to where Fire Station 27 is. How many of you all, by show of hands, have been out to Girard Landing? More than I thought. If I were a Roswell king for a day, and that is an intentional play on, for those of you that know our history, we were co-founded by Roswell King. If I was Roswell King for a day, I would sell Girard Landing to a Gwinnett and take the money that we raise from that and put it into parks in Roswell that Roswell residents use, not Gwinnett residents. And I will just close by saying my passion for this stretch of Sacred River manifests from the standpoint that I spent $5,000 of my own money and raised another $25,000 to save this beautiful 38 acres of pristine forest land on the river that was slated for development in 1998. And one more thing, please, please, before you consider spending one more dollar of our taxpayer money on consultants, consider reaching out and consulting with the tribal wise ones that we have in Roswell, the Janet Russells, the Jason Yowles, the Karen Parishes, here in this room, the Lee Flex, Scott Long, Steve Hendersons, etc. And as you all know all too well, we're more than happy to share our wisdom with you at no charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I was like hearing different out-of-the-box ideas, and just so you're aware as well, so although that plan did have the beach volleyball moving from there, we have certainly directed staff where they're not currently moving from that application. So that came up in a committee discussion that this mayor and council had. And also, Michael, I definitely appreciate you recognizing and bringing up the dredging aspect, because what I can tell you is, as you know, as I'm the old timer now at the council, I can tell you that prior to this year, prior to this mayor and council, there has been zero discussion or planning for dredging. And so I definitely saw it as a bold move, given just that it's something that is so challenging, but at the same time, there's obviously a big important reason for it. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you to this mayor and council for them. So what other questions do you have? Any questions at all? Any of the 3 bonds? Any total bonds? Anything like that?
Oh, I don't need that. You know by now. I don't need that.
Steve wants you to
Steve wants you to use it.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Lee Fleck. I'm on the board, but I'm also the president of the Northbound Homeowners Association, and I'm the numbers guy. The mayor, Councilwoman Lee, the chief of police, and the city administrator, who's not here tonight, would testify that I am the single most knowledgeable person, civilian, in this city with regard to crime stats, bar none. I effectively had a meeting with the mayor and those individuals back in February, and since then we've been able to modify the reporting that comes from Roswell with regard to crime stats. Something that I have been fighting the previous administration for 3 years. So what I want to express to you is the openness and transparency of this administration that is candidly new to our city. Now, that deserves some applause. Michael can attest to. Today I had a very interesting receipt that came in the mail. And I know you got yours yesterday. It's my Roswell property tax bill, okay? And I can assure you all that if all three go through, my property taxes will double. Not a doubt. Now, I want to show you, I want to speak to what Mike tried to convince you that the city goes out of their way to keep your taxes down. When my tax report came in, there was also this graphic here, and it shows the millage rate for the city of Roswell in the last 3 years going down to a total of 0.527 mils. Well, that's fine. So when I got this, I thought, well, I got to go back and see what actually happened to my property taxes over the same period of time. And guess what? It stayed the same. Now, it didn't save anything, okay? Because the assessed value, as every one of you know, has skyrocketed on our properties. And that's why our total taxes remain the same. I am here because, in my humble opinion, millage rates from bond issues historically have been nothing more than property tax increases. Now, they're all going to disagree with me, but I have information here I want to allude to. Now, the bonds that are being proposed are a total of $190 million. In the last 30 years, the total amount of bond money taxpayers have afforded the city of Roswell has been $97 billion. For 30 years, $97 billion. And the city wants $190 million now, and you'll get to pay for it for the next 30 years. I want to give you some of the numbers so that you understand the reality of it. In 1998, the bond was $29,440,000. In 1995, it was $18,655. There's millions. In 2000, it was the largest bond ever taxpayers approved, and that was $34 million, of which $30 million went for the purchase of Big Creek Park. Now, that bond retired in 2015, and every penny of that millage rate rolled over into the general fund, which is the day-to-day operations of the city of Roswell. Maintenance and operation, M&O they call it. In 2013, there was another almost $10 million approved, and in 2014, another $5 million. Okay? What concerns me the most, and I have to be very honest, what concerns me the most about these bonds that are being proposed, and Mike will confirm, even though I'll argue with him, that by law, any bonds that are defeated, this city cannot borrow money to address those projects. They have painted themselves in their corner for the next 5 years. They will not be able to borrow money to do anything that's on any bond that's defeated. I find that very poor judgment, not to mention the fact that $190 million is so grossly out of character. And that's why they all know how I feel about bonds. There are many things we need, but that bond has been blown totally out of proportion. Do we need a police 911 and a fire emergency station? We sure as hell do. Do we need to upgrade our parks? Certainly. But do we need $20 million for sidewalks? I don't believe so. That's my personal opinion exclusively. Some may disagree with me that you're right. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Appreciate that, Lee. Thank you for sharing that feedback. And certainly, different views on kind of what's needed and what isn't. What I'd say I think is really important. You mentioned painting in the corner and the fact that this is the opportunity to do these things. I personally feel it's the right thing, that it's not a small group making a decision whether or not taxes will go up and we'll purchase these big items. I think it's the right thing that it's gonna be the residents that decide. So I as a resident and voter in Roswell will get one vote on whether or not I'll choose to support each of these, or choose to support or deny each of these questions, and same thing with all of you. So I think that's the right thing. You're right. I think there certainly is a great argument for why we would need these public safety aspects, but at the same time, I feel it's you, the taxpayer, that should make that decision. So we definitely have the next question right here. Is there anything else that Mayor, that you want to mention from a history standpoint, or do you think we should move on to the next question?
Let's move on to the next question.
Sure. There you go, sir.
Hi, my name is Dave Rowlandson. I'm a resident of Arms Landing, and I do not have a speech. I just have a couple of questions. So this is, I see 11 total parks, and 7 of them are slated for improvements.
8.
Okay. Okay. Out of those 7, how many are in East Roswell? You don't know.
Okay.
You can show figures.
So right now.
How many are in East Roswell?
So you got East Roswell, 7 branches, and also I would consider some of the river park.
Okay, so under here it says those just get connectivity improvements for those 2 other ones. But from a capital standpoint, only East Roswell shows as getting improvements?
And there's connectivity into Big Creek, as well as $3 million that have been approved in this fiscal year.
This fiscal year. So the bond number, 107.6 million, is not this year? Future?
That is the bond escalation over that period of time, yes.
Okay. So my point, how much of that 107.6 million is scheduled for East Roswell Park?
8.6 plus the 3 million that is in this year's approved funding.
So let's keep not talking about this year's funding, we're talking about a bond. So that's about 8%, maybe a little less than that bond. What's I think I heard 96,000 residents?
Yeah, call it.
How many residents live in East Roswell?
40,000.
40,000, so that's 40%. So the parks on the east side get 8%, yet 40% of the population. Seems out of balance. Just a thought. And what's next? Fire and safety? 52 million. My question is, Captain Conroy? Chief Conroy? You said you had 160 officers?
Correct.
And you've been there 4 years?
This is my 4th year.
4th year? Congratulations, we appreciate your service. How many open head count do you have in law enforcement today? How many officers do you need to hire? Do you have open requisitions?
So I have 6 vacancies, but I have 4 job offers out for those 6 vacancies.
That's great, that's outstanding, appreciate it. You consider that your best-in-class compensation?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
And that helped us fill the vacancy.
and I think that's a recent change, didn't I hear that on the city council meetings?
July 1st, correct.
We appreciate that, that is great. And then parking deck, I guess the location is, there's opportunities. And I understand, you know, I come and I've worked with some of the greatest negotiators in the world in Vernon Marcus. So I understand the need to leverage as much as possible, including the potential locations, to keep your costs down. And that's great too. I would just encourage the topic of distance was brought up in parks. That's going to be critical. It has to be usable. It has to be close to where the action is for that other reasons. So I park a lot at the municipal parking area, and I think it's highly underutilized. And so that's at the very edge of the boundary of being usable for Canton Street activities. So that's just my opinion. I guess that is a speech. I'm sorry. I'm done. Thank you.
I think one thing that's really important to talk about, considering the discussion that just occurred, and thank you for your time, is this east-west that we're talking about, what I love about what we've got on the bond referendum is sidewalks, connectivity, the idea of the sidewalk plan, which, by the way, I think it's on like 80 million in what we really need.
You need 180 million.
We need 180 million. We're asking for just a piece of that, and we've got some T-SPLOST money for that as well. But what I'd like to just talk about while we're in East Roswell, those of you who knew me campaigning know that I really have a big heart for East Roswell. I want there to stop being an East Roswell and West Roswell. I want there to be a connected Roswell. The river project allows that. The river project is going to create a flow from Martin's Landing, where you want to start here, and connect all the way down along the river with stops that are going to be enjoyed. You can take your kayak and come out anywhere you want along the way and enjoy some of the services that will be at each of the locations along the way. The bike paths that are connecting all of East and West Roswell. There's a study that we're looking at to do a connection under 400 that may come to fruition. We're looking at a grant for that right now that would connect Big Creek. And so we're looking to connect East and West. We've got the Big Creek Bridge, we've got the Grimes Bridge. All of these things that are going to enhance and I hope break down this barrier. The other thing is when we talk about revenues in the economic development, that for example, the parking deck. The hope is that the parking deck increases convenience and those 70% of visitors who are from outside of Roswell, they're bringing tax revenue to all of Roswell to keep your taxes down and to keep the money flowing in from outside. So please do appreciate that this isn't East and West. This is so many ways to unite Roswell, and that's really, really important to me in this council.
Thank you, Councilman Vanstrom.
I just kind of echo Peter's comments, and he asked a really good question. So, just a technical piece. So when, can you pull up the parks, Steve? So, it's $62.9 million, and Will used an interesting term earlier. Remember he said $75 million of deferred maintenance, right? That's deferred. It means money that you and I should have spent as residents, the city should have spent, we didn't spend. And so when we went through the 6-month process, the staff went through the 6-month process, confession, we had $400 million of projects. Remember, we got $75 million of deferred maintenance. So we said, tell us where the parks with the worst shape are. In other words, we didn't go east-west. We said, where's our biggest needs to fix? And so the 8.6 doesn't really help the cause of the argument. 8.6 is 62.9 in terms of percentage measures. But that doesn't help the basis of the argument that you made. What I want to share with you is that when staff and council came to this, they said, where are we so badly behind that if we don't fix this, there's going to be further degradation? And I don't mean to sound trite, but really, you know the old Midas commercial, you can pay me now and pay me later? We're in a pay me later situation on our parks. This 62.9 is fixing up things that honestly I wish as a resident, you and I had spent this money 10 years ago. We're late to the party on this, on the 62.9. This is late. We've got to do this from my perspective as a resident. Because if you don't, you're going to have further depreciation of those assets, and it's going to affect the quality of life of the people, of us, using those parks. And for me, it's a responsibility issue of reinvesting in things we should have already invested in, whether it was the west side or the east side. And Peter's so right, and I want to address that from a macro perspective. Go back to the Roswell River Master Plan. So, Michael makes some good points on it. When that plan, though, came out in 2016, it was widely said as residents across the city, boy, this makes a lot of sense. Why don't we do this? And that's what we listened to. What we also listened to was this council had the wisdom, as Michael pointed out, to say, let's take that building out. But what this council also did with the leadership of staff was to do something that was off the table, which was dredging. By saying, if we're going to invest the taxpayers' dollars into a river master plan, we've got to solve the dredging equation, which the reason it's been off the table since 2008 is because everybody said it couldn't get done. And this council, particularly underneath the leadership of Will Mortland and of Stephen Malone and Jeff Leatherman, have made the possible happen in 9 months. And dredging is about to become a reality through an RFP process. That really is an incredible feat in itself. But the River Master Plan, I would suggest to you, is an east-west project. It's 7 contiguous lines along the Roswell, 7 contiguous miles of the Chattahoochee River on the Roswell waters. That's east and west. And the last thing I'll say that I think Peter addressed really well, which kind of goes to the whole heart of what I can share with you is behind this council's heart. What's behind this council's heart is what does this city look like 20 years from now? And this council is very aware that it has to solve the economic problems of the east side of our city. And what this council today is showing is a discipline to not come up with a short-term solution. I would submit to you that the River Master Plan is not a short-term solution. I would submit to you that the bike and pedestrian plan, and the reason there's 20 million instead of $180 million, is because we have to spend 85% of the money in the first 3 years. And as I said to my earlier confession to you, we had $400 million of projects. But this council, through its wisdom, along with the wisdom of the staff, said, what can we get done in 3 years' time? What can we make happen? Can we make $400 million of projects happen? Was it practical? So we got weaned down to the 62.9 on the parks, 20 million on the bike and pedestrian plan, $25 million on the River Master Plan for the 107.6 for question 1 of the Parks and Rec. Same thing on police and fire. We went through a great deal of deliberation as can we execute this plan 85% of it in 3 years? And we can. So, the last thing I want to share with you, east-west, back to Peter's point. So this council said, first thing is, we have to solve a long-term economic plan. How do we do that? 1, we hire an economic development director. 2, we activate a new development authority outside of the DDA. 3, we bring the DDA inside the strategic alignment of the economic strategy of the council and mayor. 4, we create an economic liaison position at the council to have a true economic representative for the council, Dr. Banster. 5, we bring Roswell Inc. into the economic strategy of the mayor and council, i.e. not as a disparate activity. 6, that we actually hire a true master planning company to do intentional planning. And 7, we created 4 economic nodes. And economic node 4 is from Gwinnett County to Georgia 400 on Highway 140. And it's already being, the beginning of master planning has happened at the beginning of that economic node. And I say that to you is because I do not live on the east side. So I can't sit here and tell you, oh, I understand that you feel the way that you might feel about, hey, we haven't been treated the same, or we feel like we're left out. Well, what I can tell you is that this council is deadly deliberate about solving the long-term economic issues on the east side. It's talked about every day, it's acted upon every day, it's intentional, and their heart is there, and we're going to solve the challenges that we have on the east side. But I submit to you, my fellow residents, they will not be short-term solutions, because they have short-term solutions thrown at them every single day. And so they're being deadly, deliberate, disciplined, and intentional on that. And I just want to address that, because I know that comes up a lot. And you feel like, man, we're getting an unfair share. We're not getting a fair shake of that. I just want to address that.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Dick has a question.
Yeah. I don't see any more questions coming up. Can you just give us a quick update on the
Microphone.
on the local area sales tax negotiations, because that will impact financing throughout the city going forward?
Help. Help. We need your help. We need every Fulton County resident to go to SaveFultonCities.com and reach out to your Fulton County commissioners Every 10 years, underneath the Georgia Assembly Act of Lost, LOST, local option sales tax, which is meant as property tax relief. Every 10 years, the counties in the state of Georgia and the cities inside those counties negotiate the percentages of how these local option sales tax will be distributed. It's done every 10 years. Started July 1st by law. It will end it has to end by December 30th. If an agreement is not made between Fulton County and the 15 cities in Fulton County, and think about this, for the first time perhaps in the history of Fulton County, all 15 cities are in agreement. They're in alignment. And historically, and I will tell you our sister counties do it, it's based upon population representation. In other words, you get 5% based upon you have 5% of the residents in the county. That's the historic way it's been done. Fulton County currently gets 5% of the local option sales tax. The 15 cities share the other 95%. Fulton County has 898 residents, or less than 1% of the population. The counties came in and said, the cities came in and said, basically, we understand you have the hammer because you can walk away from the negotiation because, to sound trite, this much money doesn't mean that much to you, but it means a lot to us. So we'll continue basically with the same number. The county came in and said, actually, we need 35% lost. So we've been trying to negotiate with a unwieldy negotiating partner, and we really need the help of every Fulton County resident to reach out to the Fulton County commissioners and say, you need to sit down seriously, because the one thing they fear is you. The one thing the Fulton County commissioners fear is you, and we only need 4 of them. We only need 4 of them to come to an agreement. But if they don't come to an agreement, we don't come to an agreement by December 30th, lost goes away, to your question. And that is a serious impact. For the city of Atlanta, it's $130 million. The city of Roswell, it's $30 million. $30 million of income, of property tax relief that we receive today. And so therefore this is a serious deal, and we need your help because the Georgia Assembly created laws to help keep property taxes lower. And to Michael's point earlier, this council not only reduced the millage rate, but actually put $580,000 from the FY22 budget aside to put it in FY23 so that no property taxpayer in Roswell would actually have a real tax increase. Because in the past, it's always kind of a game, right? We didn't increase your millage, but guess what? The appraisal went up, and you ended up paying more taxes. This council saw that, planned for it, put $580,000 aside. It's what's called a true real rollback rate, so that you would not pay more property taxes. And by the way, there's 4 homestead exemptions in the Roswell Digest. Ryan's here, he's the expert. From my perspective as a taxpayer, I always think it's political gamesmanship unless you're a disabled veteran. The disabled veteran one means something to me, but a $2,000 homestead exemption is a political game, in my opinion. And other people, it makes people feel good. Hey, we're going to give you $2,000 exemption. It's worth $9 a year. So, but lost, help us please on lost. We need your help. We need every Fulton County resident to go to SaveFultonCities.com. Please help us. Please reach out to your Fulton County commissioners and say, hey, put a deal with the cities together now. We need you. Thank you for that question.
Keep my mouth shut of these things, but I just can't stand it. Back to what are specific concerns for people in Martin's Landing. Let me ask just you guys, staff, if you were to walk out of this river club and hang a right on the path, how many times do you have to cross the street to attempt to walk the Eaves Road safely?
I crossed a little bridge here to get to the path.
So you across one.
Yep, then I go across the driveway, entering up the hill. Then I go up the ground path, and as it gets to the nice gravel road, which gets a little tight, then I usually make a right, go down the gravel road, but if I didn't, I'd have to cross the road again.
Right. So what in this bond referendum for parks and connectivity for sidewalks is going to remedy the situation? I am so tired of the 23, 24 years of living here, having to walk out of Martin's Landing, walk across that little bridge, run out of sidewalk at the South Shore entrance, cross the road, take the sidewalk as far as it goes, and it ends just past Northcliffe. And then you have nothing, except for a battle with cars. So I'd like a real specific answer. Is this bond referendum going to address that particular problem?
Mr. Cox.
Sidewalk or path. We'll take it.
Take either. Mr. Cox?
Yes, you do. Thank you for the question. Yes, the bike path plan that was done in 2019 had the Riverside Road corridor east of 400 in your tier 2. I'm aware of the concerns. I used to live in Roswell 20 years ago, and I used to run up and down Riverside, and I know it got very challenging once you got down here to that tight little point around the corner, because the road runs right along the bank of the river, and you really can't add a sidewalk there because you have to go out to the river or build like a boardwalk around there. So that is one of the concerns. As part of this bond, there's $20 million that will be added into the sidewalk fund, which will be going towards sidewalk gaps and multi-use trails. We have a hub and spoke system that's in our bike ped plan. Two of the major components of the trail system that don't have committed fund on the side are on Riverside Road, right out here, and along Old Alabama Road. The good news was the T-Spots program, I think one of the council members alluded to it earlier, we have a lot of transportation investment coming on the east side for multi-use trails along Old Alabama Road and also on Holcomb Ridge Road. But it's our hope that we can get more money to do more projects like this in the future. And it's my job to make sure we keep pursuing the funds through whatever mechanisms to make that hub and spoke system with multi-use trails throughout Roswell, not just on the east side, a reality over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So we're working on it, and I hope this program adds more money to that, and we'll be looking for this project as a possible candidate. So we're working on it. I do realize you're struggling, because I was counting too as you contact Red Cross, because I used to have to do that when I was down here many years ago running along Riverside.
There's a follow-up answer.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah, Mike, there's a follow-up answer to that question, though. There's another good answer to that.
Well, so two parts, but I'm not sure if we're thinking the same wavelength. One part of it is for Riverside Road, really closer to where Ace Sand is, etc. There's a project that's currently in the process of getting finalized. It's actually coming to council at the next council meeting. That does include some additional sidewalk connectivity. However, back to right here where you're talking about, it's on the list. And if currently in our sidewalk fund, we have about $1 million. So if you all choose to approve this 107.6, that means $20 million gets added to that sidewalk fund, in which case through the public process is where we find where to identify and prioritize that.
You're always a good precedent, because there's a list of projects in order, as you just said, publicly, that decision will be made and what priority goes, how we're going to address that.
That's right. And the second part?
So my note on that is really not.
I don't think so.
Not right now.
To be determined.
No, I don't feel that way.
The reason I ask that, because it's an example of what some people have been frustrated with T-Splost. The big significant change that was made to the T-Splost that we voted for. Admittedly, you guys aren't the council and mayor that made the changes that were made to T-Splost. What confidence can you give to us that the commitments that are made for these bond referendums will be fulfilled, knowing that you legally can override anything that we vote for?
So
Go ahead.
So I guess I question how we can legally override it, because it's bottom line is if if you all decide to approve $107.6 million for rec and parks as well as sidewalks and bike and master plan, that $107.6 million can go to nothing else. It cannot go to public safety, it cannot go to a parking deck, it cannot go to anything. It has to be something within here that's been discussed. There of course is always the risk of some just cost or something increasing, in which case a piece cannot be covered, we have to find additional funding. The hope is that staff, and the expectation is staff was pretty conservative with a lot of the estimates, but bottom line is, if you approve $107.6 million, there's nowhere else that can go. We have the list right here of the only place that's $107.6 million can go, and to nothing else.
Let me address your Listen, let me be cynical.
Let me be cynical for a second. So, Michael's exactly right, but let's say we're completely wrong, and these projects, these $62.9 million cost $80 million. Let's just say it's an absolute disaster, which, by the way, we're asking for something that I know is hard in Roswell. We're asking for that word T, which I know doesn't a little crazy for somebody in an elected office to say this. We're asking for you to trust us a little bit. Like, we are seriously asking for some of that. But let's say this is a disaster. Let's say the 62.9, based upon the completion, cost $80 million. And to Michael's point, so where did that money come from? Your bond didn't go to 107.6, right? It came, that excess of $17 million is going to come from either the river master plan, in this case, or the bike, or the $20 million for pass. To your question, like, now, I legally, right, to Mike's point, when we first came out with this, Susan, the granularity was insane. My fault. So when we went through this process, we were incredibly granular. And I realized we're making a mistake, we're putting ourselves in a box, because East Roswell Park may cost $8.8 million, right? Now, the plan is that $200,000, for example, that is probably going to have to come from one of these other park projects. So, but I will tell you that the amount of planning intentionality went into this, because remember, it's $400 million projects, these continued to get dwindled down, and these were the major projects, of which there was a tremendous amount of granularity. So I can say to you that I expect us to invest $8.6 million or less in East Roswell Park to do everything we say that we're going to do for us as residents. Now, but that was one of the reasons we took some of the granularity away, because 2 years from now, Susan, I didn't want you to say to me, Kurt, you lied to me. You said you were going to do this, and this. And I did this, and this, but I didn't do this. And you said, but you said that to me. And I didn't want to say that granularity was going to put me in a trap where you were going to say you lied to me. So that's why we put budget figures in there. We have a backup of spreadsheets. You can see what we're going to do. Stephen, do we have that with us? So you can see everything that $8.6 million will be spent on. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this elected council and this mayor are asking for something unusual. We are asking for trust. And I recognize that that is a tough thing to ask for in the climate of 2022. But we're residents just like you. And speaking as someone, I have no political ambition, my friends. This is it. The only reason I'm here as a resident is to get stuff done for our city. That's it. Period. End of story. So I can tell you another answer to this question. This will be an incredibly transparent process. In other words, every one of these projects will be on the board. The progress of these projects will be on the board. You'll see the status and the cost of these projects as the money's being spent. And you'll see the progress of the project as it's going on. Will, you want to address that real quick for a second? So here's
Here's the granular, this is not granular enough because we have it much more granular than this, but on this spreadsheet, it tells you what that 8.6 million is going to do. But we have spreadsheets that are much more granular in terms of the actual expenditures. Did I answer your question in any kind of way?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't tell about that, Will.
So writing's a little small, that's East Roswell Park. We are talking about $8.6 million. Mike, you may have to read this.
For the glasses.
East Roswell Park, approximately $8.6 million. Athletic facility and park upgrades such as restrooms, fields, playgrounds, trail improvements, and general park amenities. Includes provisions for a skate park. So that's, and then as the mayor mentioned, at the committee meeting, when a lot of this was discussed, there was a full detailed Excel that got into to much greater detail. But without a doubt, staff certainly has a plan. They have the budget for it, and if you all approve it, then it's a very public process to really track the just really the status as well as any challenges and updates.
I think that's an important part, Mark. Like, this will not be done in secret. There's none of these, every one of these projects will be, and by the way, my background in the corporate world hates the word transparent. Those of you who know me, I don't like the word transparent, because my experience when somebody uses the word transparent, you're about to be transposed. So, but everything will be very public, illuminated, seen, visible. There will be no hiding of any information or data, good, bad, or indifferent. We're all going to know because we want to know. And because we want this city to be a highly mobilized, effective government that is accountable to its people. And I think, so you're going to see on these projects, we're working on this, by the way, on our transportation projects right now. On Oxbow is a perfect example. Oxbow is a perfect example. It's our hope before this thing gets done that it will be illuminated so that you can see the day-by-day status. You've noticed you're probably seeing much more illumination on the website about drones, but we want to make that 2022 information where you can see the percentage of the product, the cost of the project, so you can see all the pieces of the project as they're outlined and what's done and what's not done. We haven't gotten that done yet. But I tell you that is, you will see that on these if you as voters decide to pass these.
Any additional questions? And start with Scott and then Rome. You already know my staff. Happy to give everybody a chance.
With some perspective and then a really just one question. Thank y'all for being here. The one perspective I had was that when I saw what was on the bonds and saw that the River Parks master plan was a major part of the bonds, I actually started to feel a little bit guilty that we were benefiting so much, that Martin's Landing was benefiting so much, because I guess you could have a Berlin Wall kind of view about what lines you're allowed to cross or not go across or something like that, but honestly, Don White Park is, to me, is East Roswell. It's, Don White, Ace Sand Company, Riverside Park, even Azalea Drive. I get on my bike in a driveway and call anybody in West Roswell and I'll get there first because it's right next to us. Anybody want to race? Christine might, but on bikes. But seriously, I'm at every about 3 or 4 days a week. I run right past the famous redneck park or whatever that's called, and I get there by foot. It's to me it's East Roswell. It's very accessible to our neighborhood, and we're hugely benefiting by the River Parks Master Plan. And I'm just thankful for y'all bringing bonds back up again. The reason we had Big Creek is because of the bond referendum, and it was not a granular line item bond referendum. It just said buy some parkland. That was all it was. Nobody knew where it was going to be, and in fact, Big Creek was under contract to build townhomes or homes or something like that. And then lo and behold, that bond that we had was in the past, had money to buy Big Creek Park. That's how we got Big Creek Park. The East Roswell Fire Station was rebuilt, the same thing. We had a bond item that said new fire station. Didn't say where it was going to be, didn't say how big, how it was going to look, no details, no lines. Turned out they've got a great fire station from that bond referendum. But my question is, Roswell has been famous for doing studies and plans, and then spending a lot of money on the studies and plans and then putting them on the shelf. I remember when Mike was running for mayor, I think he held up a stack, a big stack, went after the other plans. So I guess my question is, how many of these plans, or can y'all enumerate some of or all of the plans that have been on the shelf forever that are kind of built into these bonds?
That's the easiest question all night, and I think everybody here probably can answer this one easily, because they are all involved in solving the equation. Anybody want to take it? Well, yeah, I
guess
I mean, so this group of people, this amazing group of people,
This amazing group of people discovered, by the way, decided instead of going all the way back, they just went from 2010 to 2021. And my memory is maybe a tad off on this, but I think we came up with 121 plans. Where's Lenore? I wish she was here, because she was our executive. She did an incredible job of administrating this. So we took 121 plans, took them to Greenville. Those 121 plans between 2010 and 2021 cost us, you and I, about $7.5 million, just plans. And we took the redundancy of those 121 plans and distilled it down to, if I remember correct, 45 or 41 plans. Forgive me, my memory's off a little bit. You guys may remember this. And then we all, as a group, with the staff, went through those 45 plans. And we said, oh my gosh, there's some great plans here. What are we going to do? Are we going to kill this? Are we going to put it into its ongoing moratorium, which is where they all sit on the shelf? As Peter said, Roswell is a city in plans, it's Plansville. Are we going to activate it? And so, what you're seeing is, you saw that Lee Hill said, you know what, we're going to activate the Roswell Parks Plan. You saw Will Worthland come out and said, we're going to activate the Roswell Parks Plan. You saw Mike Palermo come out of there and say, we're going to activate the Master Transportation Plan. You saw Peter Manstrom come out there and say, we're going to activate an economic development plan, and we're going to make one that we haven't made, but we're going to start the bike and pedestrian plan. You saw Christine Hill come out there and say, by the way, this wasn't part of the plan, that we're going to create zero-based budgeting in our government. This all came out of Greenville. So to answer your question, Scott, we weren't as overwhelmed with all the plans that every one of us should be, and that with Greenville is the first place where that finally you had an elected body, your elected body, go try to do something about that and say, yes, no, or let's continue to let it sit on the shelf. And get the redundancy out. And so, Roswell Parks Fund, Transportation Plan, Parks Plan, Bike and Pedestrian Plan, Master Plan.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I'm just saying, for a great example is our master planning of Oakland Bridge and Highway 9 and 400 and Oakland Bridge, which is where we're starting our master planning. Those took all of the other studies that have been done in those areas into account. And so basically creating public input instantly, because those were all public input. And so thank you for that question. That was terrific, because it is exactly what we're doing.
Will Workman, the River Parks Master Plan, I mean, on and on.
Real quick, I'm going to let Stephen address this, because he knows it a little bit better than I do, but Five River Park Master Plan that was just approved is right in line with everything we're talking here. One second.
So yeah, so when, and I touched on it a little bit, but our 5-year park master plan, we began that process back in November, December of last year. We used a company that came in, so they've been developing this plan. This is something, there's a reason we call it a 5-year master plan. It's because that's our term that we look at when we realize that we we have to come back and make sure that there's a refresh to that. We start the whole process over again. When we began that, they went through and actually gave us a rundown, and that's where we were able to come up with a better idea of that $75 million of deferred maintenance. It's because it literally took a price tag and attached it to every item, to every ball field light, to every piece of that plan to allow us to come up with some of these figures that you see here today. So that was a big instrument in which we used, and something that we do every 5 years. We'll go back through that exercise.
So, okay, Stephen. Yeah, so great points. Just so many plans, and finally, this is the chance, if you want to execute some of them, you get to decide. And Roman, it's right, I do want to give people a chance that have never asked a question when they've won things. So if we just ask,
Thanks everyone for everything you've been doing and for coming here and for all the participants here in Martin's Lane as well. It really shows that everyone cares, and I appreciate that. I probably have 100 questions, but one that's jumping to the top for me is actually a couple. So what did, and this is, excuse my ignorance, but what determines when bond referenda have to exist at all, as opposed to, you were saying that this is deferred maintenance. Like, these are things, we pared down the big grand vision and the dream of what we really want long term down to like the bare necessities. Like, why wouldn't that just be something that is automatic? So that's one question. And then also, like, we were talking, you know, for me, I love the parks. I love, you know, if I hadn't come here and you just asked me just generically, like, should money go toward parks, I would say yes. But I kind of wonder, like, what in particular, like, we didn't talk at all about in what ways are parks deficient. And so there's just huge numbers thrown around, but it wasn't like with the fire chief, where it's like, here's specific examples of like where the money needs to go. So I'd be curious to hear about, you know, here's the numbers again, but from my perspective, I really appreciated the parks, and so I'm just wondering, where's that from?
Excellent. So I'm going to hand over for the parks question to Stephen here, but for the first one, the question I heard was, if I heard it correctly, is you're hearing about the deferred maintenance and how little was invested. Why does it get to the point where there needs to be a bond referendum? Why couldn't it just been paid when it was needed? Am I hearing that correctly? And so that was basically, that was decisions made by previous mayors and councils. Ultimately, there's prioritization. There's a limited amount of funding, and unfortunately, when decisions were made, one of the places to spend that money was not on the maintenance. So that's where we are, and that's how that ends up happening. Just the example of consistently being around $1 million per year and then dropping down to less than $100,000 per year has a significant impact, just as an example. But for more specifically around the parks here, Steve.
So if you get a chance, the green flyer that's up there will give you a good snapshot and an overview of what those dollars within each park will address. More specifically, I'll use East Roswell Park since it's closest to Martin's Landing, but if you go on the Eaves Road to East Roswell Park and you pass the tennis courts, you're going to see wooden light bulbs that are still in service right now that are beyond their useful life. I joked in earlier presentations today that you'll be lucky to find one of those wood light poles that is still straight. It tends to bow. We've actively gone through a replacement plan, I would say, over the last 10 years, where we have requested dollar amounts each year that allow us to replace some of those light poles, but not all of them. So now, those are the last wooden light poles that I believe that we have in our parks right now, and they're the last slated to get replaced. In addition to that, when you start looking at things like the artificial turf fields that are also located at East Roswell Park, those were installed over 10 years ago. They're beyond their useful life. So as we went into this presentation, we had the conversation with Mayor and Council several weeks ago that Field 2 that's located at East Roswell Park was probably the priority that we needed to replace due to safety and tearing in the seams. Within the last 2 or 3 weeks since we had that discussion with Mayor and Council, we've actually gone back, and Field 1 now has become the priority. So it truly has become what is broken worse. And that's now become the priority in replacement. So we have $3 million for East Roswell Park that's been allocated in the budget this year. So those items are being addressed, but they're being addressed in a priority list order. And it really comes down to what do we need to replace quickest because it is failing the fastest. So when we start to think of things like we had a water main break in Roswell Area Park about a month ago. Those are the things that we're looking at from the ground up. We have to look at those parks because overall, as we discussed, it's 20, 30, 40-year-old parks. And that infrastructure that's there has to be addressed and updated. Did that answer some of your questions?
Yeah, and I have more unless other people need to. Anyone else want to ask about it?
I do want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask questions, has too, but we'd love to go back if that's all right. One of the next patients.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Roman Perzak. I bought my first house at the subdivision, so I still remember, and I bring my grandchildren this week to show where I was growing in school. But I have a question. Talking about the parks and everything, my concern is I don't see anywhere what about the safety to walking into parks, like cameras. You know, we see on the TV and everywhere that safety doesn't exist. And the chiefs basically save over lives 24/7. And then you have the project for safety. My question is, what's the percentage that police is getting, and what's the percentage that the fire department is getting from the 52 million?
Excellent, thank you. So before I let Ryan or the chiefs ask for the answer to the percentage, as for you mentioned cameras, different safety aspects, so there was a much longer list that was provided by staff of needs, and we had to look for a way to whittle it down, and one way that we did it was actually by dollar amount. So I forget where our threshold was, but let's just say it was around $1 million. It was $1 million. Anything below $1 million, we felt it should be our responsibility in an annual budget to be making those updates and providing those improvements. Anything above $1 million is where it's not something that typically we can address in an annual budget, in which case we're going out to you, the voters, to decide. And who wants to cover the separation? Sounds like
Joe, first. So when we costed it out for the police and fire split, I think we were at $29 million for the fire stations and roughly $23 million for the police and fire headquarters, which gets us to that 52. But that split, obviously, the police and fire headquarters, that's a shared venture as well between police, fire, emergency operations center, and 911. Does that answer your question on that piece?
Thanks, Chiefs.
Hey, Jim, answer the question on rock and the flock.
So, yeah, you had a question about safety. In this year's operating budget, Mayor and City Council gave money towards the Roswell Crime Center. This is bringing us up to where we need to be for cameras, license plate readers throughout the city. There are license plate readers, all the cities around us are ahead of us in that game. So they gave us approval starting July 1st. And we started the process with Flock. We've got 80 cameras that are being installed. Last week, I think we were over 40. I think we're up to 60 of those cameras have been installed already throughout the city. And they're a game changer in law enforcement. As I mentioned in the earlier meeting, when we were at one of the training sessions about this process, the other cities stood up and they said, when you look at the metro map, Roswell was a black hole. Would somebody from Roswell please get the cameras? One of my majors was in the class and he stood up and said, it's underway, we're just waiting for the budget to buy first. So,
are you going to increase the cameras in all the parks and all the time that we have?
Correct, they're going throughout the city.
So when the kids are playing in the playground with the parents, they'll be safe over there, because you know, some people coming and do all kinds of stuff.
So they're saying we do not have cameras on every inch of the city, no. We've got every street, every entrance, every exit, all of the major neighborhoods. So we'll be able to track vehicles as they come and go. We've got cameras at each park that will capture this information as well. But no, every inch, we're not redundant in this.
In general, you know.
Absolutely.
Public is,
Yeah, this is gonna be a game changer.
Okay, thank you.
Look, towards the end of the year, December, look for some of those success stories.
Share the story of how they will also help prevent
Yes.
certain crimes.
Thank you. It's been a long day, our third meeting, so I can't remember which story I said at which. So one of the features of these cameras, and we have certain alerts that go to all of our officers that are working. So one of the alerts is a stolen vehicle. So if we have a stolen vehicle that enters the city, comes down the Barton's Lane, and we see it turn into the neighborhood at 2 in the morning, what are they going to do here? They're going to break into cars.
Right.
So we know that we will come and get the area to catch them before, they might catch 1 or 2 cars, but we'll catch them before they victimize the entire neighborhood. So that's going to be a great feature. We're tracking success stories. There's many success stories. Some of our homicides have been solved with this information from the limited cameras. Private neighborhoods have purchased these cameras. These are all city-owned cameras that we're installing right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Excellent. So it looks like we've got some additional from people that, I want to hear everybody's. I just want to also give the opportunity too, for anyone afterwards, there's always the opportunity to ask some follow-up questions as well. So I've seen 3 hands so far of additional questions.
I'd say, Mike, you might want to get the questions public, because I got a feeling that the council will be running out of here to go watch the Braves play the Phillies here pretty quick. What do you think?
Is it a rate limit?
All right, so I did have a follow-up there. So I took two-part question. First one's really easy. I want to make sure I understand. Say all of these get passed, and I think it's $344 impact on me, right? And so I think that shows up. I have a mortgage, so I think that shows up in that tax bill that comes in October and should be escrowed for, and they'll pay it on back. So that's what a resident probably won't see, but does see impact-wise. Okay, got it. So now the next question becomes, and again, very novice at municipal financing. So I'm assuming there are some assumptions about, these are muni bonds that are going to float out there, and you're going to have to pay a certain interest rate on that. And we're in an environment of skyrocketing interest rates, big risk that we're going to have to pay a lot more interest to get these bonds done, therefore less money left over to do these projects, right? So can you, maybe there's a quick, I think it's a finance director is sneaking up front, some sort of what if analysis that you have done and what potential impacts, especially when we look forward, right? There's a hidden recession going on right now. And what if we go deeper and deeper into a recession, to a depression? What if we see 20% unemployment in the city of Roswell? That impacts tax receipts. What if that's a doomsday scenario? Could go better, worse than that. But you tell me the what if scenarios and what kind of risk we have.
Sure. So we are working with our city's financial advisor. They're helping us on some of these projections, and I can tell you that basically the projections that we're working with assume an interest rate of 5%. When the bond referendum happens, and assuming some of the questions pass, it'll probably be about 90 days at the earliest before the city could actually issue bonds. And so as a result, that's kind of why we're projecting about a 5% interest rate on that. I can tell you too, based in conversations with our financial advisor, obviously they're in the market all the time, and I can tell you that in the last month or so, they've seen interest rates on actual issuances of about 4.15%. And because the city is AAA bond rated, that also goes into a long way in terms of helping us obtain the lowest possible interest rate in the market. In terms of your question about risk, essentially, if we were to see property values decrease or something like that, obviously the city is on the hook for the debt that we would be issuing, and so the city would have to make adjustments in the millage rates to collect enough debt service, enough revenues to pay the debt service annually. To answer your question.
So if we had some people not paying their tax bills, that factors into a calculation. By the next annual cycle, you adjust millage rates. And the people that are still left paying tax bills, might see incremental increase?
Well, we have a very high collection rate. About annually, it's about 98.5%. And of course, those that aren't paying, those we're continuing to pursue those property tax bills. And obviously, if you're not paying your property taxes, then the city is able to place a lien on the property, so that when the property is sold, that tax bill has to be satisfied before the property can be sold. So yes.
One other thing, just to address that. So 340, if all three questions are passed by us as residents,
Based on a $450,000 home, it would be worth $342 a year if everything got done. The reality is it'll be phased in. 85% of the money has to be spent basically within the first 3 years. So $342 based upon a $450,000 home it's kind of the conservative number. So based upon your property tax next year, I would be very surprised if you had $850 tax bill this year based on a $450,000 home, that your taxes would be $342 higher next year.
Is that right? We float these bonds, the bonds are out there, we gotta start paying.
I think he's talking
Is it
multiple
phases?
issues. There's going to be more than one issue.
Or we won't float the whole thing at once.
Yeah, contract improves, we have to do all the work. There's only so much work or capital.
That would not be the most efficient use of our money, obviously.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've spent about 2 hours talking about parks and recreation. I have no problem with maintenance of those. I want to touch base on question 2 and 3. Number 2, this council knows that's a throwaway bond, that it's not going to pass. The $20 million is only to build the parking lot. To buy the property will double that price. Okay, that's what's projected. Okay, this parking lot was proposed by Councilwoman Betty Price back in 2009. It's been a dead issue ever since. It keeps coming up. Okay, now question number 2. It took 7 years to purchase the property for Fire Station 4, our fire station. Didn't happen in 3 years, it took 7 years. I was personally involved in that from beginning to end. Okay, now, the chief is talking about moving Fire Station 27 over to Horseshoe Bend. I venture to say that purchase of property in Horseshoe Bend and right across from Horseshoe Bend is going to be astronomical. The other place that they're going to propose to build a fire station is the property that the city was forced to buy, the Ace Hardware property down there by the Oxbow Hole. And I understand the Oxbow project has been delayed until 2026. Now, in our general fund, I can speak to that, it may be wrong, I just saw it on the internet. In our general fund, we have $55.8 million unallocated excess reserves. So when Mayor Palermo was talking about the $5 million that they put out reserves to keep our taxes down, well, that money's been there for a long, long time. And in the Oxbow project, which originally projected to be 16 million, it's now up to 23. The reserves that we have for T-SPLOS is only 22.6. So we can't even do the Oxbow project with the reserves we have on T-SPLOS. So I think that the number 3 is a dead issue. I know for a fact number 2, South Roswell is so vehemently opposed because of the Oxbow fiasco to relocating another fire station right next to their neighborhood with whistles and bells and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry to say, I think we put too much on the plate with that number 2.
So thank you, Lee. And regarding Oxbow, I do want to just remind everyone that the goal, so basically when this mayor and council came in January, literally nothing was going on. So if you drove by 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you would have seen that literally 0 work was going on. And that was prior to them starting in January. That was when they took office. in January. That being said, you can see there's a lot of progress now, and a part of it was coming up with an actual plan, because again, nothing was going on. And that's where, with that plan, it's obviously not ideal. We obviously wish it was already done, but when this mayor and council came together, came up with the plan, saw the issues going on with Oxbow, the date and the commitment that was given is Christmas of next year, and there's a lot of incentives and focus on it being sooner. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that it will be, but whichever day it is next year, I'm very confident that it will be in 2023. And so regarding Oxbow, and then regarding fire station locations, what I can confidently tell you is there is no individual location for any of the fire stations that has been selected already. So it's if you all decide you're willing to make this investment, at that point is when there will be the opportunity to find and negotiate for those locations. What I will strongly say, both to you residents here, as well as to you, Mayor and Council, I strongly believe that for any of these questions, if approved by the voters, if any of them require land acquisition, I strongly believe that has to happen immediately. And so that's the thing I strongly believe. I want you all to know, it's my personal viewpoint, I want this Mayor and Council to know that without a doubt, if you approve any of these that require land, that we need to do that immediately to get the land. And for that reason, and Lee, actually, regarding question 3, if the voters of Roswell decide they do want to invest in a parking deck right there, just given the cost aspects you brought up, I think there's advantages to using city-owned property that's on the west side of Highway 9, as this gentleman right here mentioned for proximity, because I think it's certainly much easier anytime we don't have to acquire land. So thank you for all those points, Lee.
I was curious to follow up about the idea of being painted into a corner that someone mentioned earlier about if, I think maybe it was Lee, so if there's some law that says that you can't, if it's 5 years or something, you can't do any of the stuff that gets denied, then it's my interpretation of your answer back at that question was that this was intentional, like strategically you wanted to sort of make citizens choose at this point to say like, okay, we're gonna go do these projects in the parks, or you're not for 5 years. We're gonna, like, essentially, isn't that creating more deferred maintenance?
Now, let me give some clarification on that. So it's not that you can't spend any money or invest it in these things, it's you cannot borrow any money towards these things. So basically, regarding the parks, it means absolutely, if you all decide, no, you do not want to invest $107.6 million into question number 1, it doesn't mean that that Stephen's team just takes a year off. It just means that everything we're doing is within the annual budget. But I think for the bigger example is, let's look at question 3. If voters decide that no, they do not want to invest in a parking deck, then I think it's pretty clear that the voters have spoken, and there's not going to be any discussion of the city investing in a parking deck because the voters have made it clear on what their viewpoint is on that. So that's what I meant from that standpoint. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but you're saying that the annual budget is kind of paltry in terms of being able to do all these projects that we're so far behind on. So then isn't the effect the same?
Well, so at the end of the day, we put together this question 1 because there's a need there's that potential need for these improvements, and there's not the money available to do it. So it's either we go and we ask you, do you want to invest in this? Do you want to make these updates? And if the answer is no, frankly, there was not the money to do all these things anyways. I think the big example, as Scott Long had brought up, is the River Parks Master Plan. So when that came out in 2016, so I think it was certainly brought up, there were some details in there that certainly were not wildly popular, but the majority of the plan was wildly popular. There was no elected official that I've served with, and I've served with a lot since January 2016. I've never heard anybody against the River Parks Master Plan. It's just never been realized or had any actual real progress made because it's just the city doesn't have the money. And so this is a chance for you to decide, you know what, it was a really popular plan, do you want to invest in the River Parks Master Plan? And this is the only way that it can be funded.
I think the nut of the matter is, Michael, it's political will and political courage. We're just residents. This is a brand new council person. This is a brand new council person. And this is a brand new council person. And I'm a brand new elected official. And the only thing we're bringing to this is our earnestness to make the city better. And I will tell you is that I think the one thing that's different about this council and the coordination with the staff is courage. These haven't been before you because there hasn't been the courage elected-wise to do it, because this is hard to come out and meet with your fellow residents and say, we think it's in our best interest, or we believe that you think that we think this is the best thing to do for our city. And so most of us go, well, wait a minute, we got all this history in the city. The city has not been truthful with us, or the city has done stuff behind the scenes, on and on and on and on. All I hear is history. All I hear is negative history in our city. You guys elected a new council and a new mayor to go do something about your city. That's really what this is about. And that's why you said the word trust earlier. Do you trust that there has been the earnestness and the due diligence about these projects? You may not agree with everything. I wouldn't expect you to. Just like none of us are ever going to be in complete agreement. We don't agree on everything. This council does not agree with everything. We have to have a lot of discussion. And as the elected representatives of the people of Roswell, we put something together that I would have a completely different take. I think it's a shame that there's only been $98 million in general obligation bonds before the people since 1988. I think that's a shame. I think you and I are paying a price for it. I think you and I are responsible for what the city looks like 20 years from now. That's what this is about. It's about the future. It's about investing in the future. It's about investing in our city. It's about investing in one another. It's about investing in the Roswell that's to become. Roswell's a great city. But there is a price to pay. If you and I got together and created a city together, we would say, we got to spend money to live together. And the problem is, we've all become so darn cynical about living together and how government abuses us and how we abuse one another, that sometimes we forget it does come down to simple trust. Do I believe that these people are going to do the right thing? That's all this is about, if you want to know the truth. That's all it's about. And if I don't believe it, I can ask so many questions that I can talk myself and my fellow neighbors out of it. And I can do it out of the past. There's plenty in the past to dig into. There's so much in this city that we can rip up and tear apart one another apart. But these people ran to change the city going forward. And I'll answer this question in probably the most practical way I know how. There is no legal reason that these bonds could not come back up again next year. Not one. But I will tell you, there's no way that these people will bring these bond questions before you, because this is hard work. Because these are the people that take the beating. These are the people that are taking the beating of the past. These are the people who say, well, this happened 20 years ago, this happened 5 years ago, such and such happened. And these people keep getting beat up for it. They didn't do it. They're trying to solve it. They're trying to solve it. And so I use that crazy word, trust. I recognize the city perhaps has done some things behind the scenes that ain't great. I do. But I'm asking you to trust these people. Because I promise you that they're not going to do you wrong. And so they can't advocate for this, and I can't advocate for it. But obviously, this is a serious consideration that they're putting before you. And they're not doing it it's not done in a trivial manner. It's done because it's an investment in the future of our city.
So, thank you, Mayor. Any,
I have one question. I've attended 3 of these meetings now, and I'm just so disappointed in the attendance. And I don't know what y'all's perspective is, but this is the most significant thing facing the city in my 38 years here. Martin's Landing residents didn't show up at East Roswell. They didn't show up here, really. I mean, we took out some of the people that have been in 3 of the meetings or more. It's a handful. What do y'all, what's the reason for that? It's a rhetorical question, I think. It's bloody disappointing.
Yeah.
thank you for being engaged. Thank you for coming here to get educated. And I think hopefully what you saw, it's not pushing you to vote one way or another for or against. You make the decision you think is right for you. But I really appreciate the fact that you did take the time away from your family, away from your typical night, and just wanted to learn a little bit more about the bonds. And certainly, as always, any questions that you ever have, I obviously can pick up the phone and call, but also the email Roswell Mayor and Council at roswellgov.com, which is a single email address that we all see and some senior staff members see. Any questions at all, I hope you feel you feel that you'll be getting an answer on that, and you feel comfortable reaching out, because we appreciate most of this time.
Well, for the record, let's just be clear about this. The email address is
mpalermo@roswellgov. And the second thing is, I want to tell you that I was dark disappointed with Martin's Landing when I walked up the hallway, went into the bathroom, and I saw a picture of Councilman Palermo. So I feel like
All right, I'm taking this. On behalf of Martin's Landing, I want to thank you guys so much. And this is such a very small token of our appreciation for all staff and elected officials that have taken time out of their personal lives, their desire to watch baseball games, whatever. And really to the Martin's Landing residents that came too. Thank you for taking time out of your lives and for caring about what happens in Roswell. So,
Thank you.